Something calculated is happening inside the Cleveland Browns right now, and most people are completely missing it. Because from the outside, this looks like a normal offseason storyline. A young quarterback getting reps, a coaching staff evaluating talent, a typical "let's see who wins the job" situation. But that's not what this is. Not even close. What's actually unfolding behind the scenes feels far more deliberate, more controlled, almost like every move is part of a bigger plan that's been building quietly for weeks. And at the center of it all is Todd Monken. Because according to what's being observed inside that facility, Monken isn't just coaching quarterbacks. He's not rotating guys equally. He's not keeping things open-ended the way teams usually do this time of year. Instead, he's focusing on one, Shedeur Sanders. And the way he's doing it, that's what has people paying attention. This isn't just about reps or practice performance. It's about how Shedeur is being positioned, how he's being spoken to, how he's being used around the team. There's a growing sense, based on reports and insider observations, that this isn't a competition anymore. It's something else entirely. Some are even starting to say it looks like a quiet handoff of leadership, happening right in front of everyone, but without being officially announced. And here, where it gets even more interesting. Because this shift didn't come out of nowhere. There's been a lot of buzz online about how Shedeur was handled last season. Some believe he never truly got a fair opportunity to show what he could do. Others think the narrative around him was shaped before he ever stepped on the field. Now, that narrative might be getting rewritten in real time. But the biggest question is this. Is this just a young quarterback having a strong offseason? Or are we watching the early stages of something much bigger, something the Browns have been planning all along? Because if you look closely, the signs are already there. The more you look at what's happening, the clearer it becomes. This isn't a quarterback competition. It's a takeover. Because when teams run a true competition, you can see it. Reps are split. Messaging is careful. Coaches go out of their way to say things like "everything is open" or "we're evaluating everyone equally." But that's not the tone coming out of Cleveland. Instead, all signs point in one direction, and that direction leads straight to Shedeur Sanders. And the biggest reason, the way Todd Monken is operating. This isn't just a coach running drills or calling plays. Reports and observations suggest something much deeper is going on. Monken isn't simply working with Shedeur, he's collaborating with him. There's a visible connection there that goes beyond the usual coach-player dynamic you see during off-season programs. And that matters, because when a coach starts treating a young quarterback like a partner instead of just a project, that tells you everything about how they see him. It means trust is already there. It means belief is already established. And most importantly, it means the decision may already be made. Now here, where it gets even more interesting. This doesn't feel accidental. It feels intentional. Every interaction, every rep, every moment of involvement, it all seems to be reinforcing one idea. This offense is going to run through Shedeur, not eventually, not if he develops, but now. And when you stack that up against how most teams handle rookies, the difference is obvious. There's usually hesitation, a slow ramp-up, a sense of "let's not rush this." But Cleveland, they're doing the opposite. They're accelerating it. And some people are starting to notice. There's been growing buzz suggesting that what we're seeing isn't just development, it's positioning. A quiet but deliberate shift, where one player is being elevated while everyone else fades into the background. Now, to be fair, none of this has been officially announced. No one has stepped up to a podium and said, "This is our guy, no questions asked." But sometimes you don't need words, because actions tell you everything. And right now, the actions inside that building are painting a very clear picture. But what really confirms it isn't just how Monken is working with Shedeur. It's what he's asking him to do next. But here, where things go from interesting to undeniable. Because it's not just how Todd Monken is working with Shedeur Sanders, it's what he's asking him to do. And this is the part most people overlook. According to what's been observed inside the building, Monken has started leaning on Shedeur to communicate with teammates, not in some official, announced way, not with a title, not with a press release, but naturally, organically, and that matters more than anything. Because coaches don't do that unless they trust you. Think about it when a coordinator starts using a player as a voice inside the locker room. He's doing more than assigning responsibility. He's signaling leadership. He's telling the rest of the team, without actually saying it out loud, this is the guy you listen to. And in the NFL, that's not something you give away lightly, especially not to a rookie. That kind of role is usually reserved for veterans, players who have already proven themselves over years, players who have earned the respect of the locker room through time, experience, and production. But here, it's already happening with Shedeur, which tells you everything. Because this isn't about potential anymore. This is about positioning. Monken isn't waiting for Shedeur to become a leader. He's putting him in situations where leadership is required. He's accelerating it. And when you combine that with everything else we've seen, the extra attention, the collaborative approach, the consistent involvement, it starts to form a very clear pattern. This isn't random. This is engineered. Now some might say, it's just off-season work. It doesn't mean anything yet. But that's not how leadership works. Leadership starts long before the games begin. It's built in moments like this, when teammates start recognizing who the message is coming from, when they start naturally looking to one person for direction, even if no one officially named them the leader. And that's exactly what seems to be happening here. Quietly, subtly, but very intentionally. Because by the time the season arrives, the goal is simple. There's no debate, no hesitation, no confusion about who this team revolves around. And if you're paying attention, that decision might have already been made. But what makes this even more powerful isn't just what the coaches are doing. It's the fact that the locker room was already starting to feel it before any of this even began. But here's what really changes everything. This didn't start with the coaches. The belief in Shedeur Sanders was already there. Long before Todd Monken stepped in, long before the offseason hype, long before any of these reports started circulating, the locker room had already seen something. And that's what makes this so powerful. Because players don't care about headlines. They don't care about draft position. They don't care about media narratives. The only thing that matters inside that building is what you do when things get tough. And last season, things got tough. Really tough. Reports and discussions around that time suggest Shedeur was put in a difficult position, limited opportunities, a system that didn't fully support him, and a situation where, at times, it felt like he was being overlooked rather than developed. Now again, some of that is based on what people around the situation have said. Not everything is officially confirmed, but the pattern is what stands out. Because despite all of that, he never cracked. No public frustration, no finger-pointing, no distractions. Just work. And that didn't go unnoticed. Teammates saw it every day. They saw how he handled pressure. They saw how he carried himself when things weren't going his way. And maybe most importantly, they saw how he kept showing up, even when the situation around him wasn't ideal. That's how respect is built in the NFL. Not through talk, through consistency, through toughness, through professionalism, when it would have been easy to do the opposite. And over time, that kind of behavior starts to stick. It creates belief, real belief, the kind that doesn't come from coaches or media narratives, but from shared experience. So now, when Monken steps in and starts building around Shedeur, he's not creating something from scratch. He's reinforcing something that already exists. That's the difference. This isn't forced leadership. This isn't a coach trying to convince a locker room to follow someone they're unsure about. This is alignment. The coaching staff and the players seeing the same thing and moving in the same direction. And when that happens, things can shift fast. Because once a locker room believes in a quarterback, everything changes. Energy changes. Confidence changes. The way the team responds in big moments changes. And right now, it feels like that shift is already underway. But what makes this even more intense is how the coaching staff is now turning that belief into something permanent. And this is where things take a turn, because Todd Monken isn't just building up Shedeur Sanders behind the scenes. He's actively pushing back against everything that's been said about him. And that matters more than people realize. Because over the past year, there's been a narrative floating around Shedeur. You've probably heard it. Questions about whether he's a true playmaker, doubts about his readiness, conversations that, depending on who you ask, felt a little premature. Now, to be fair, some of that criticism comes with being a young quarterback. It's part of the game. But there's also been a lot of buzz suggesting that those narratives may have taken on a life of their own, repeated so often that they started sounding like facts. And Monken, he's not buying it. In fact, he's doing the opposite. He's calling it out. There have been moments, whether in interviews or internal discussions, where Monken has reportedly pushed back hard on those labels, challenging the idea that Shedeur isn't a playmaker, pointing to what he's done throughout his career, making it clear that, from his perspective, this isn't some unproven project. This is a quarterback who's been making plays long before he ever stepped into an NFL building. And that kind of backing, it's powerful. Because when a coach defends a player publicly, it sends a message. But when that defense feels consistent, when it feels intentional, it starts to shift perception. It tells the locker room, this is our guy. It tells the media, you might have gotten this one wrong. And it tells the player himself, we believe in you fully. Now here, where it gets even more interesting. Some believe, again, this is based on reports and discussions, not confirmed statements, that part of Monken's approach is about undoing what happened last season. The idea that Shedeur was labeled too quickly, that he was judged in a situation that didn't fully set him up to succeed. Whether you agree with that or not, the shift is happening. Because Monken isn't just ignoring the noise. He's dismantling it, piece by piece. And when you combine that with everything else we've seen, the leadership role, the locker room support, the offensive focus, it starts to feel like more than just development. It feels like a reset, a complete rewrite of how this quarterback is viewed inside the organization. But to really understand why that reset is happening, you have to look at what went wrong before Monken ever arrived. But to really understand why all of this is happening right now, you have to go back to what went wrong before. Because there's been a lot of talk, some confirmed, some based on reports, that Shedeur Sanders wasn't just underused last season. He may have been overlooked entirely. And that's a strong claim. But when you start looking at what's been said, the pieces begin to line up. There's been growing buzz that during his early time in the system, Shedeur wasn't given meaningful first-team opportunities. In fact, some reports suggest he received little to no real chances to work with the starting unit. For a player with his profile, his draft position, and his potential, that raised a lot of eyebrows. Now, to be fair, teams have their reasons. Coaches make decisions based on what they see in practice, in meetings, in preparation, and not everything is public. But still, the optics didn't sit right with a lot of people. Because when a young quarterback isn't even being tested with the first team, it creates questions. Was he not ready? Or was he not given the chance to be ready? And that's where things started to shift internally. Because Andrew Berry reportedly addressed this situation in a way that caught attention. Instead of using softer language like developmental or limited reps, he used a much sharper word. Ignored. Now again, context matters, and not every detail is fully confirmed. But if that word was truly used in reference to how young players were handled, it tells you everything about the level of frustration inside that front office. That's not a small critique. That's a signal something went wrong. And it also explains why change became necessary. Because when an organization starts to feel like talent isn't being properly developed, or worse, not even being utilized, that's when decisions get made. That's when leadership steps in. And that's when a reset begins. Which brings us back to Todd Monken. Because his arrival doesn't feel like a routine hire. It feels like a response, a correction, a shift away from what happened before toward something completely different. And when you look at how aggressively he's now building around Shedeur, it starts to make sense. This isn't just about moving forward. It's about fixing what was missed and making sure it doesn't happen again. And if there was still any doubt about what direction this team is heading, this is where it disappears. Because it's not just the coaching staff showing belief in Shedeur Sanders, it's the entire organization. And you can see it in what they're not doing. The Cleveland Browns are not out searching for another quarterback. They're not bringing in veterans to push competition. They're not creating that usual offseason noise where teams stack the room just to keep options open. Instead, they've gone quiet on that front. And that silence, it speaks volumes. Because in today's NFL, if a team isn't fully convinced about their quarterback situation, they're always exploring alternatives, always making calls, always keeping doors open. But Cleveland isn't doing that. Which tells you one thing: they've already made their decision. Now look at what they are doing. They're investing in weapons. There's been a lot of buzz around the Browns targeting explosive playmakers, wide receivers who can stretch the field, create separation, and turn small opportunities into big gains. Players who make life easier for a quarterback. And teams don't build like that by accident. You don't go out of your way to upgrade your offensive weapons unless you believe the person throwing the ball can take advantage of it. That's just how roster building works. So when you connect the dots, the picture becomes clear. They're not preparing for a competition. They're preparing for a system built around Shedeur. Now, of course, none of this has been officially stamped with a headline like QB1 confirmed. But in the NFL, actions always matter more than words. And every move the front office is making right now feels like a vote of confidence. A quiet one, but a strong one. Some analysts have even pointed out, again, this is based on observation, not official statements, that Cleveland's offseason strategy looks exactly like what teams do when they've already identified their franchise quarterback. Surround him with talent, build the offense to his strengths, remove uncertainty. And that's exactly what's happening. Piece by piece, move by move. So at this point, it's not just a feeling anymore. It's a pattern. And every part of that pattern is pointing in the same direction. But here's the thing. Not everyone seems to be part of that plan. But while everything seems to be aligning perfectly for Shedeur Sanders, not everyone in that quarterback room is moving in the same direction. And that's where things get a little uncomfortable. Because there's been growing buzz, again, based on reports and observations, that Dillon Gabriel hasn't exactly been part of this new wave under Todd Monken. In fact, some reports suggest there's been little to no visible connection between Gabriel and the new coaching setup so far. No early presence, no strong engagement, no clear sign that he's stepping forward to compete for control of this offense. Now, to be clear, not all of this is officially confirmed. Off-season schedules vary, players train in different places, and sometimes what we don't see publicly doesn't tell the full story. But still, perception matters, especially in a situation like this. Because when a new coach comes in, especially one who's clearly reshaping the identity of the offense, those early interactions are important. They set the tone, they show intent, they signal who's ready to step in and take control. And right now, the contrast is hard to ignore. On one side, you've got Shedeur, constantly present, involved, building chemistry, stepping into leadership moments. On the other side, you've got Gabriel, at least from what's being reported, less visible in that process. And in a competition, or even in a shifting quarterback room, that gap can grow quickly. Because opportunities in the NFL don't wait. They move. And if one player is fully embedded in the system, while another is still trying to find his footing, the direction of the team starts to lock in fast. That doesn't mean Gabriel doesn't have talent. It doesn't mean he won't have opportunities elsewhere. In fact, some believe he could still be a valuable option for teams looking for a developmental quarterback. But in Cleveland, the timing might not be in his favor. Because while he's trying to establish his place, the system around him is already being built, without him at the center of it. And that's the key. This isn't just about who's better. It's about who the team is choosing to build around. And right now, all signs suggest that decision is already made, which makes Gabriel's situation less about competition and more about being on the outside of a plan that's already in motion. At this point, it's no longer subtle. What Todd Monken is doing with Shedeur Sanders isn't just development. It's construction. Because when you take everything we've seen, the leadership moments, the collaboration, the public support, the front office moves, it all points to one thing. This is being engineered. Step by step. Think about it. Monken isn't sitting back and hoping Shedeur becomes the leader of this team over time. He's creating the exact conditions where that outcome becomes inevitable. He's putting him in positions where teammates naturally start looking to him, where communication flows through him, where the offense begins to revolve around him before a single regular season snap is even played. That's not luck. That's design. And when you combine that with the locker room already believing in him, it becomes even more powerful. Because now you've got alignment. Coaches pushing him forward. Teammates backing him up. Front office building around him. That's how a quarterback takes over a franchise. Not in one big moment, but through a series of calculated moves that slowly shift everything in his direction. Now, of course, there's still a level of speculation here. No one has officially come out and said, this is the long-term plan, this is how we're doing it. But when you look at the pattern, it's hard to ignore what's happening. Everything connects. Every move reinforces the next. And the result, a quarterback who isn't just being developed, but positioned as the center of the entire organization. And here's the part that makes this even more interesting. Because when a player feels that level of belief, when a coach is backing you publicly, trusting you privately, and building the system around you, it changes how you play. It frees you. It gives you confidence. It allows you to operate without hesitation. And that's exactly what it looks like Monken is trying to unlock. Not just a capable quarterback, but a fully confident leader who knows the team is behind him. And if that works, this won't just look like a good offseason decision. It'll look like the moment everything changed. The moment the Browns stopped searching, and finally found their guy. So when you put all of this together, it stops looking like coincidence. It starts looking like a plan. Because every piece of this, from the way Todd Monken is working, to how Shedeur Sanders is being positioned, to what the Cleveland Browns front office is doing, it all lines up too cleanly to be random. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't a last-minute decision. This was built, step by step. Think about the sequence. First, the locker room already starts believing in Shedeur based on what they saw last season. Then a new coach comes in. Not just any coach, but one who immediately begins reinforcing that belief. Not slowly, not cautiously, but aggressively. He elevates him. He involves him. He gives him responsibility. At the same time, the front office quietly supports it. No new quarterbacks brought in. Instead, more weapons, more tools, more pieces designed to help one specific player succeed. That's not how teams operate when they're unsure. That's how teams move when they've already made their decision. Now, of course, nothing has been officially declared. No headline saying QB1 locked in. No press conference confirming everything we're seeing. But here's the reality. They don't need to say it, because actions speak louder than anything else. And right now, every action inside that building is pointing in the same direction. Some might still call this a competition. Some might believe there's still a chance things shift. And technically, until games are played, anything is possible. But if you're reading between the lines, it's already happening. This isn't about who might win the job. It's about who the job is being built for. And that distinction changes everything. Because if this works, if Shedeur steps onto the field and delivers, this entire offseason won't be remembered as controversial or confusing. It'll be remembered as the moment the Browns quietly made their move, the moment they stopped searching, the moment they committed, and the moment a new era officially began. So now the only question left is simple. Are we watching the rise of a franchise quarterback in real time? Or are we watching a gamble that's about to define everything moving forward? Because one way or another, this story isn't over. It's just getting started.